Well, hey, you guys. Welcome back to the salon. Long time no see. So, as I mentioned in my last video about thriller episodes, I've decided to switch to a one episode at a time kind of format for both the thriller series and this here Night Gallery series, rather than the 6 episode chunks that I was doing before. As I talked about on there, it's just a lot less daunting and time consuming for me overall, and I should be able to get more of them done, hopefully, even though, I have a lot of other stuff going on too, so I know I don't post as much on here as I would like to, but I feel like if it's just one episode at a time, I won't get overwhelmed and stuff like that. So I hope y'all don't mind. So on this thing here, we're just going to be talking about one episode of Night Gallery. So when we last left the show, we were talking about season 2, and I think the last one we tackled was episode 12. So today we're going to move on to episode 13. Now this one actually is 2 stories, neither of which are particularly scary, and they weren't super compelling, at least in my opinion. The first story actually has some great acting performances by a number of actors that most people will recognize, which we'll get into. But overall, this was just kind of a fair episode for me. So the first story is called The Messiah on Mott Street, and it was written by Rod Serling, and it was directed by Don Taylor, who's actually an actor. I recognized him from a number of things, and he's a director too. He was actually in some classic films from like the 40s and 50s, like Father of the Bride, the original one. I don't even think that was the original one because I think there was an older one than that. But, the one from like 1950, I think it was. And Stalag 17, he was in that too. But he was also the director on Escape from the Planet of the Apes from 1971, and also Damien Omen 2 from 1978. So this story, The Messiah on Mott Street, it kind of revolves around this sort of elderly, he's 77 years old, a little bit poverty-stricken Jewish man named Abraham Goldman, who's actually played by veteran actor Edward G. Robinson. He always played kind of gangsters and things like that back in the day. So he lives in this kind of shitty tenement building and is kind of starting to fear that, he's going to die soon. Like his time on Earth is running short, you know what I mean? Now, he has this doctor who actually makes house calls, and his name is Dr. Levine, and he's actually played by Tony Roberts, who was in a shit ton of, like, Woody Allen movies, and he was also in Serpico from 1973, but he's in a large amount of stuff, and you will recognize him easily. So his doctor, like, doesn't really seem to be disabusing him of this whole, you're gonna die soon notion that he has. He basically tells him, well, if you've been thinking about getting those affairs in order, you might want to do that sooner rather than later. You know what I'm saying? Now, as sick as he is, Abraham is nonetheless adamant that he absolutely cannot die yet, because he has to be around to look after his grandson, Mikey, who I'm presuming is orphaned. He's like the only family member that he has. So Abraham just loves this kid more than anything else in the world, and the feeling appears to be mutual. They do have a very nice, very close relationship. Now, Abraham also tells Dr. Levine, don't worry about me because I got this letter the other day from my no-account bum of a brother in California, and he said that he was going to pay me back this huge amount of money that he had loaned him like a long time ago, you know what I mean? Or stole from him. I can't remember if it was stole or borrowed. When that money finally arrives, Abraham says, I'll be able to get back to my old self, and I'll move out of this shithole apartment into a better house with Mikey, and everything will be awesome. Now, Dr. Levine, he seems sympathetic, but he's like a little bit caustic too at the same time. He's kind of more of like a realist. And he thinks this whole coming into a whole bunch of money thing is just a crock of shit, you know what I mean? He just thinks he's delusional. Because Abraham's brother never paid back any money he borrowed or stole at any other time in history, so why should he start now? And the doctor also finds out from this child welfare worker that comes to the apartment. She's actually like stopping by to assess Mikey's living situation because they're thinking of taking him away because of various reasons, because Abraham is too old to take care of him. But the child welfare worker says, oh yeah, Abraham's brother is actually in a mental hospital in California, and he says all kind of crazy shit. So this letter that he wrote him is probably like just complete fantasy. So Abraham has kind of long discussions with Dr. Levine, and as well as some kind of more kid-friendly discussions with Mikey. basically he tells the doctor that, you know, when the angel of death comes for me, I'm just going to basically tell him to fuck off. Like, he doesn't really use those words, but that's kind of what he means. And then he starts sort of waxing poetic about the arrival of the Messiah, who's going to show up right on this impoverished street that they live on and fix everyone's problems, like fix all their problems. Now, again, Dr. Levine thinks he's delusional and, you know, kind of not so much delusional as crazy, but kind of like, well, he just needs some hope to cling on to kind of thing. You know what I mean? And maybe deep down he knows that none of this stuff is going to happen. But Mikey, of course, being a kid, he buys right into this whole Messiah thing. And the first thing is like, I'm going to ask the Messiah like for unlimited ice cream or some shit like that. But then he decides that the only thing that he'll ask for, because he's going to ask for like all the toys and everything like that. But then he's like, you know what? I think the only thing that I'll ask for is to make his grandpa better. And I was like, way to kiss ass, kid. It's like your grandpa doesn't have any money to like leave you in the will. So you don't really have to like brown nose that much. That's so mean. But yeah, that's kind of like, I just want grandpa to get better. It was that kind of thing. So all of this talk about the Messiah and fending off the angel of death and all that doesn't really seem to be doing jack squat, because Abraham's illness, whatever it is, it seems to be some kind of pulmonary or respiratory illness, because he's always hacking and coughing and he's having trouble breathing and stuff. But it's just getting like worse and worse. And Child Protective Services obviously are kind of sniffing around, and they're sort of threatening. I guess threatening isn't really the word, but they're basically like, look, we're going to have to take Mikey and put him in a foster home because Abraham is getting too sick to take care of him. Like, he can barely get out of bed, and he's going to die soon, and the kid's going to be an orphan, so we really need to get that ball rolling, you know what I mean? Now, on Christmas Eve or Christmas Day, I can't remember which one it was, it kind of looks like the old dude's, you know, number is up, right? He sees like this menacing shadow in his room and starts kind of raging at it, like giving this monologue. But later he tells, because I assumed, oh, it's the angel of death, and he's just like, you get out of here, buddy, you know what I mean? But then later he tells Mikey it was the Messiah, which I thought was a good thing, but like, whatever. Maybe he was just telling Mikey that to not scare him, I guess. So Abraham is basically at death's door, and Mikey realizes this, even though they're trying to shield the kid from the worst of it, you know what I mean? And the kid basically just like runs out the apartment and runs out into the street trying to find this Messiah that his grandpa promised was out there and was like on his way there. Now, the first guy he encounters is one of those kind of nut bar like street preachers. And he basically, he's the worst. He just like screams into the kid's face, we're all doomed, doomed, your grandfather is doomed, and all this other. I'm like, that's nice. Like, say it to like a 10-year-old kid or whatever it is. And then finally like this cop comes along and kind of shoos his little ranting ass like into the next block. It's like, you know, keep moving along, you know, that's that kind of thing. So then Mikey approaches another man who is actually played by the great Yaphet Kotto, which I think is how you pronounce his name, who will always be Parker from Alien to me, even though he's been in a million other things. And he basically identifies him as the Messiah and begs him to come help his grandpa. It's like, you said you would, and you're the Messiah, blah, blah, blah. And the man is like, well, why do you think that I'm the Messiah, like in particular? And Mikey says, it's because his grandfather told him that the Messiah would be big and black. And I was like, well, I admit I cringed kind of hard at that. But, you know, Yaphet Kotto is big and black, you know, indeed. So I guess I'll let it slide. But it was just like, I don't know, it just like seemed like a really awkward phrasing. You know what I mean? And I mean, he thought it was funny, at least in the context of the show. He kind of laughed. So I don't know. I just thought that was kind of amusing. So this man, whose name we eventually learn is Mr. Bruckner, he neither confirms nor denies being the Messiah. But he does agree to come back to the apartment to just, you know, see what he can do for moral support or whatever, because the kid is just like beside himself. He's just completely distraught. So once the guy's there, Dr. Levine basically says, yeah, Abraham's going to kick the bucket like pretty much any minute, and that if you, Bruckner, indeed do have any magical powers, which of course the doctor doesn't believe, you better like whip those out because we're going to need those like really, really soon. So then it will probably surprise no one that kind of a weird wind like blows through the room, and the front door like opens by itself, and then Abraham's bedroom door also flies open by itself, and they all go and look in there, and Abraham is sitting up in bed, fit as a fiddle, totally fine. So Dr. Levine comes in there and he's like completely shocked, and he examines him and he's like, I can't believe like you recovered like immediately, like you're better again and all this other kind of stuff. Whereas like before he was like literally on the edge of death, you know. So then the doctor like turns toward the living room and realizes that Mr. Bruckner has mysteriously vanished. And then a couple minutes later, somebody knocked on the apartment door and Mikey goes to answer it. And it's Mr. Bruckner again, but this time he's in a postal uniform, like he was just wearing regular clothes before. And he hands Mikey this kind of special delivery envelope or whatever. And this envelope, as you again might have guessed, has a letter from Abraham's no-account brother in California and a check for $10,000. And everybody just rejoices. It's a Christmas miracle, even though all the characters are in this are Jewish. You know what I mean? This is actually kind of a Hanukkah story. The funny thing about this really struck me as very funny. This episode came out it first aired in 1971. And there was one point in it where I think it was the child welfare worker, and she was leaving the building, and she said, Merry Christmas to the doctor. And he like snarkily says back to her, Happy Hanukkah. And I was like, I don't know why that made me laugh so hard, because I'm like, man, if you did that in a thing nowadays, like all the people that get all their panties in a bunch about like war on Christmas and you have to say Merry Christmas and not Happy Holidays. Bah, 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 bah. Like, I'm like, I wonder if like people got mad about it back then. That she said Merry Christmas and he was like Happy Hanukkah. Because I kind of feel like if you did that to the wrong person nowadays, like somebody would punch you in the face. But I don't know. It's just like, I just thought that was like super, super funny. Another point I want to make. So he gets the check and the letter he gets the check in the mail. I was just saying, well, I would wait to pop out, you know, the champagne and everything like that until I made sure that the brother's check cleared. But, you know, that's just me, because it's like that check could totally bounce. And they're just like, woo, I have $10,000. And then the bank's like, yeah, no, you don't. Incidentally, $10,000 in 1971 money, that amounts to about $77,500, like in 2024 money. So that's quite a nice chunk of change. I was really curious because I was like, $10,000. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's a lot of money, but I was just kind of like, that's not really a lot. I mean, that wouldn't even like pay off like half my credit card debts like nowadays, which is really depressing to think about. But I was like, but that was probably a lot of money in 1971. And indeed it was. I mean, that was quite a large chunk of change, like I said. So I guess the brother came through after all. So yeah, I mean, this was kind of one of those, I feel like a lot of Rod Serling ones were kind of like sentimental in a lot of ways, but this was like a pretty entertaining episode. Like, it didn't have any surprises. I mean, as soon as he ran into Bruckner, like, you knew, I mean, obviously he's going to be the Messiah, you know what I mean? But I really did like all the characters and their interactions and stuff. And even though the dialogue had that kind of trademark Rod Serling like floweriness that he always puts in there, it was still pretty fun, and it was clearly very heartfelt. I also, as I alluded to earlier, I like that it's essentially like a holiday, like a Christmas story, like a Christmas miracle type of story, but it's kind of more Hanukkah focused. I mean, you don't really see anybody celebrating Hanukkah, but somebody says Happy Hanukkah and they're all Jewish and stuff. And now I'm going to say that obviously it does utilize the kind of uncomfortable magical Negro trope. But I do love the ballsiness of making a black man turn out to be essentially Jesus, is what he is in this. And I kind of wondered, I was like, wow, I wonder if any little old church ladies called in to complain about this episode, like back in the day. Regardless of whether they did or not, I mean, I'm totally fine with Yaphet Kotto being Jesus, and I can't imagine why anyone wouldn't be. So the second story, The Painted Mirror. This one was shorter and kind of more funny than scary. And I kind of found myself not liking it as much as the first one. Like I said, I tended not to like the ones that had more of a comedic edge to them, with a few exceptions. But usually the ones that tried to be funny were just kind of like lame and sort of cheesy. This one wasn't overtly comedy, but it had like a lot of comedic touches to it, so I didn't like it as much. Now, this was actually based on a short story by the quite well-known science fiction and fantasy writer Donald Wandry, is I think how you pronounce his last name. He actually co-founded Arkham House Publishing with August Derleth, which obviously published a lot of Lovecraft stuff back in the day. So this has quite a good pedigree, at least the original story does. Now, it was actually adapted for the screen and then also directed by Gene Kearney, who actually directed a lot of these. So this story here involves kind of a sad sack old man named Frank Standish. And he has, you are led to presume, owned for a long time this dusty old antique shop. And he just loves old things, and he just loves puttering around in the store, and he's just like very old school, you know what I mean? But evidently he's had some recent financial difficulties, and this has forced him to partner with a kind of obnoxious co-owner whose name is Mrs. Moore, who is played by Zsa Zsa Gabor, of all people. Now, she actually, even though she's kind of a dick, like, she does rightly inform him that it's like, well, you need to modernize the store if we're going to make any money, because obviously this shop isn't making any money. Now, her idea of modernization is kind of, she's kind of slowly turning the place into sort of a bougie, like, boutique kind of place. Like, she's got loud, groovy music playing. The walls are kind of like pale pink or something like that. She's like kind of tacky bric-a-brac and like up to the minute fashions type of thing. So that's kind of her idea. So it's not even really an antique shop anymore, you know? Now, Standish is, of course, horrified by the changes made to his beloved antique shop, and constantly laments about the good old days, this and that, which, I mean, honestly, it didn't really endear him to me. I mean, and I've talked about this, I think I talked about this on a couple of the other episodes that I talked about, where I don't, this whole, like, people, like, lamenting, oh, the good old days, and everything was so much better, like, back in the old days and stuff, like, just pining for their youth. Like, I don't know, as that trope always kind of got on my nerves, and it kind of does here as well. I mean, the thing about it, okay, like, as obnoxious as Zsa Zsa's character was in this, you know, the antique shop was apparently, according to the implication of the story, was kind of circling the drain before Zsa Zsa even got there. So something obviously had to be done, like, to keep the place afloat. Whether what she was doing was going to work or not, that's a whole other issue. But I'm just saying, obviously the store was going to close if something wasn't done. And also I'm saying, like, you know, don't get me wrong, Zsa Zsa herself is just as insufferable in this. I mean, and she is just, like, really mean to, like, this old man. She's always insulting him and kind of abusing him verbally and, you know, just making fun of him and shit like that. And just generally kind of being, you know, like, a massive twant. So, I mean, there's, like, really no likable characters. And I have to say, and I may be alone here, because I did read, there's not a huge amount of reviews of this, like, online that I could find. But some of the other reviews thought that, like, the acting in this was good. But I have to say, I thought Zsa Zsa's acting in this was not good. To me, at least, and this could be just my perception, she seemed like she wasn't even bothering. Like, her eyes always looked unfocused. Like, she wasn't looking at what she was supposed to be looking at, like, in the context of the story. Or, like, she was kind of, like, looking around for something better elsewhere, or her mind was wandering or something. And she sounded kind of languid, like, when she talked, you know, like, almost like she just, like, housed two big fistfuls of quaaludes or something like that. So anyway, the old guy, Standish, he has this kind of chaste little crush on a regular customer who's, like, this older woman whose name is Ellen. Now, whenever she comes into the store, which I guess is quite often, Standish takes her into his living quarters in the back, where they, you know, savagely rut like animals in heat. Just kidding, they really do that. They just sit back there, and that would have made it a lot better, honestly, but no. They just sit back there and drink tea and talk about how much better things were back in the day. Yawn. So one day, Ellen comes in, and she wants to sell this mirror that she found in her attic. Now, the frame is actually really nice, but somebody has painted over the glass for some unknown reason. Hence the name of the story, The Painted Mirror. Standish actually says that he'll give her $10 for it, which, again, I had to check. That's about $77 in 2024 money. So, again, not bad. But Zsa Zsa is not having it. She's basically like, nah, we can't sell the ugly old thing. Like, you know, we can leave it here on consignment, but that's about, I'm not giving you any money for it. She does offer Ellen, though, $1 for, like, the cart that she brought the mirror in on. So that was magnanimous of her, wasn't it? So Standish says, okay, well, we'll keep it here in the store on consignment. And so after Ellen leaves, he, you know, sets about trying to scrape the paint off of the glass. Now, it takes him a while, but the long and short of it is, once he gets the paint off, he finds, to his utter astonishment, that there's some kind of Bert I. Gordon dinosaur world, like, back in the mirror, essentially. And what's more, you can just walk into it like it's a portal. So Standish and Ellen I mean, because she comes into the store and he's like, look at this shit. You know what I mean? Like, they're just staring at it and wonder, like, holy crap, as you would. Now, Jaja's kitty cat, she has a cat and a dog in the store, and they're both adorable. The kitty cat jumps into the mirror, and I was like, no, kitty, no. Because you know how I do. You know what I mean? Because there's anytime, like, any kind of, like, peril, like, involving a cat or a dog, I'm just kind of like, I can't watch. But so the kitty jumps in there, and I'm like, no, kitty. But then, just as quickly, the cat comes running back out the mirror like, nope. Like, you know, clearly terrified of whatever is in there, which you don't see yet. So while Ellen and Standish are just standing there quietly wigging out about this whole situation, again, as you would, Jaja kind of swans into the back and says, oh, by the way, Standish, I've bought you out of your share of the store, so you need to get your shit and get out. Now, Standish is obviously boggled by this situation because not only does he doubt his ability to get another job at his age, you're presuming he's in his 60s or so, but also because he was living in the store, like he had an apartment behind the store, so now he's like essentially homeless. I love how Ellen, his supposed girl, it's not really his girlfriend, but I guess they're kind of sort of. And she's basically like, well, I'd ask you to move in with me, but I live with relatives, so no can do. Like, yeah, thanks for nothing, Ellen. Standish, though, comes up with sort of a diabolical plan. So what he does is he picks up a ball and tosses it into the mirror. Now, Jaja's dog chases it in there, because remember I said she had a cat and a dog. Now, Jaja, apparently not at all fazed by the fact that there's a portal to a prehistoric dinosaur dimension in the back room of this antique shop, just steps right in there, like going after the dog. And after that, there's this weird sequence that seemed endless. Like, I feel like I'm still watching it right now. You know what I mean? But it was probably only a couple of minutes, but it just seemed really, really long to me, like, while I was watching it. So, during this sequence, like, Jaja is wandering around this Land of the Lost set, is what it looks like, very listlessly calling for her dog. Everything she says in here is kind of listless. Funnily enough, the dog's name is Pookie, which is also the name of one of my cats. So that kind of amused the shit out of me. That the whole time for however 47 hours or however long it was, like, Jaja is just wandering around this set, like, very sluggishly going, Pookie, where are you? Pookie, come here. Pookie, where are you? Like that, like, over and over again, like 40,000 times. I was starting to, like, cringe. It's just, I'm sure it's not that many times. I'm exaggerating, obviously, but it seemed like that. And the weird thing about it is that every time she said it, it was like the same inflection, which made me suspect that they just recorded her saying each phrase one time and then played them over and over. That's exact, because she sounded exactly the same each time. Pookie, come here. Pookie, where are you? I'm not going to do her accent, but you know what I mean? You know who Zsa Zsa Gabor is. You know what her accent sounds like. But yeah, I'm not doing that. But yeah, that's kind of what it sounds like, just over and over. It was totally bizarre. Yeah, I mean, I thought it was bizarre. Oh, and I forgot to mention that while she's aimlessly meandering around in there, the scene would kind of quick cut to this janky looking dinosaur that we're supposed to believe was stalking her, even though it wasn't super clear, like, where it was in relation to where she was. So once Jaja kind of twigs onto the fact that this hallway-sized lost continent dimension is just chock full of hungry dinos, she starts screaming and then runs back toward the mirror. Now, unbeknownst to her, like, while she was in there, Standish and Ellen have very deviously and pretty quickly painted back over the glass, which traps her and Pookie in there with the dinosaurs. Pookie, her dog, not Pookie, my cat, because yeah, that'd be a whole other issue. Now, honestly, I can't be too mad that they'd let the paper mache-asaurus, like, eat Jaja, but leaving the dog in there to die, that's beyond the pale. I'm sorry. So as such, I can't root for Standish in this. Sorry. Enjoy going bankrupt, you dog murdering old coot. So yeah, I didn't love this segment, but I will say that I did have a lot of fun with Jaja's lethargic performance. Lethargic, drugged up, not really sure. Like I said, maybe that was just me, that was my perception, but everything, she just sounded So like out of it, like wow, whoa, you know, she kind of sounded like that to me, and I don't know what it is. And also the amateurish dinosaur puppets were also like a lot of fun. So yeah, next time I do a night gallery one, obviously it'll be season 2, episode 14. So I don't know when that'll go up, but it'll be eventually, I reckon. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this breakdown. Please remember, if you enjoyed the video, like, share, subscribe, and comment, and I'll see you guys again on the next one. Bye.